Okay, guys, this is the last part, part 4 of the alien interview by Lawrence R. Spencer.
Hey everyone, good to see you again. You made it to part 4.
Yay! It's super long book and everything, but well, it's not even super long, but it's super interesting, and there's like a lot to talk about. I bet you we've done more talking than it would take you to actually listen to the.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. It's 4 hours. Yeah, but it's a good discussion. So join us for discussing your thoughts on it is really the idea
Yeah, for sure.
behind us. So part 4 was starting from chapter 10 to the end of the book, and that was like an hour and a half, which we're going to break down right now.
Yeah. Okay, so let's just get into it. It starts with evolution. And and then basically, okay, so like this was what Errol the alien told Matilda, the lady who's doing the telepathy. She's like, the theory of evolution assumes that the motivational source of energy that animates every life form does not exist. It assumes that an inanimate object or a chemical concoction can suddenly become alive or animate accidentally or spontaneously, or perhaps an electronic discharge into a pool of chemical ooze will magically spawn a self-animated entity. There is no evidence whatsoever this is true, simply because it is not true. Dr. Frankenstein did not really resurrect the dead into a maundering monster, except in the imagination of the Isby who wrote the fictional story One Dark and Stormy Night. So, yeah, so she goes into like basically, and I've thought about that before because I've like thought, or even in conventional science, it talks about how, yeah, the theory of how this all started is, some bacteria just started self-replicating at one point, like some cell divided right randomly in some water.
It came out and walked out of the water.
Yeah,
exactly.
And then eventually, grew eyes and walked out and this and that, and then split into every other species and this and that. Which, okay.
So Errol pretty much destroys the theory of evolution, and she breaks holes in it like big time, that this is not true.
Yeah, and I don't know how I feel, because I have to say evolution has never 100% stuck with. I read Darwin's book myself, and it does a lot of just observations of like similarities and stuff, but like I don't know, I don't take that to necessarily mean we were all one cell at one point. But at the same time, like what she does end up explaining is that we're basically all like life forms are made by these companies that are made by Isbys that have these companies that specialize, like design stuff, and that doesn't make much sense to me either.
Right, because they're companies, or what? Like,
well, just kind of like, why? What's
the
point in all that? Like her explanation of, okay, so I guess we can get into that. She talks about so there's one company called Bugs and Blossoms, and it helped create life forms feeding off of other life forms, because that means that the animals didn't before that the animals didn't need to eat, and they got their energy from the sun. So they patented the sexual reproduction because it was a way for them to like have self-replicating animals on planets. And then ultimately the food and the sex idea completely ruined the biotech industry, including the blossoms, and the entire market of manufactured life forms disappeared. So when something goes extinct now, it can't be recreated by tech, but because the tech is unknown. She said there's probably records somehow, somewhere, that one day, she said there are probably records of how to do it created there, but no one's currently doing it. So that's why you have to protect the dwindling numbers of species on Earth, and that's why there is some vested interest in why keeping, some of these species alive is important.
Right, because there's no records, or if there is a record, it's at some galaxy far away on some computer, pretty much somewhere. That was like if there's something saved on it. But on the other hand, I had questions about that too. So basically she's saying that, if a species gets destroyed on Earth, or anywhere really.
Yeah.
If it gets endangered, it gets wiped out. Like there's no way to reproduce it easily because all of the information on it or the programming of it like has disappeared because these bioengineering companies no longer really exist and they don't create this. And because we have this like self reproduction thing going on with sexual reproduction. And so once it's wiped out, like that's it. But that to me, I felt like we could still access that information because it's still somewhere. I mean, it's got to
Well,
exist somewhere.
and then you're kind of going like, okay, so then does that mean animals aren't ISBs? And does that mean that like, but then we are ISBs as well, because like we're part of this thing, or sorry,
Yeah.
we're part of the manufactured, we were created. We were like, according to Arrow, we were not evolved from apes. So then that's kind of like, okay, well,
Yes.
so is every time a life form is self-replicated, how does, is it thereby animated by an ISB or not? Because that's a little bit confusing.
Well, I don't know, but it's self-replicated through like reproduction. Then what? Yeah, what does that mean exactly?
Well, she also
What she did
almost
say,
talks about how like where does this go? I talk about how it's kind of like she basically almost gave me the impression that like we're attracted to orgasms or something whenever we're in our ISB form, like that electricity between two people or whatever is what it's like. We're attracted to pain and pleasure and beauty or something, and so we
yes.
come that like so we get stuck into that, and that's how you get like you get caught into now you come in this body.
Yes, and then other species like cows, I think she used as an example, if that was right, cattle. Well, she said cattle, that they would be more like attracted to smells. So their hormones would be attracted to smells and that would get them like reproducing again. So yeah, we already know that about biology, right? Like there are these hormones that we all have in different species, and that's what brings us wanting to do it again because of the pleasure of the physical. But then yeah, I don't know. So your original question was like, so does that mean that like, I guess, are you asking like, is an animal consciously creating itself like when it's reproduction, like as we are as
Or is
humans?
a soul like, like for me personally, I like I don't I think that just because we think that we're more evolved and that we are the consciousness of the earth or whatever, we have this sort of, we as in human beings seem to have this notion that we have a soul and animals don't, or that we have like we're better than they are, or we're more evolved and I don't ascribe to that actually. So I don't know. So for me, I'm just kind of going like this almost kind of, I don't know, this kind of seems like that kind of thing where it's like, well, it doesn't really talk about the life forms having ISBs, as it were, like spiritual immortal beings animating them.
Well, she did say that everything, it says eventually a new life form was endowed or animated with a life force or spiritual energy before being introduced into actual planetary environment for final testing. That was when she was talking about like how a species or an organism makes it to a planet. And so it would do all this previous testing in these laboratories. And then once it landed on the planet, it would be the final testing. And that's where eugenics came in, or what I kind of thought of as evolution until she mentioned eugenics. So eugenics was like the choosing of the best and the best species together in order to move, or parts of that species in order to move forward and create like another one. And that would be like evolving in its environment, which is where I thought maybe evolution would come in and that at that stage, but I'm not really sure. But then but the point about that like everything was animated with a life force or spiritual energy. So everything has a spiritual energy regardless of whether whatever's here in the physical world. But I don't know, at some point that means that there's consciousness, right? So like what's conscious and what's not.
Yeah, but at the same time, it feels like she also kind of talks about how to be incarnated at this time is you're in a prison. just like it's actually undesirable too. So it's like, what is it? Like, do you create life forms and people are, I mean, because even if you're an elephant on Earth or an elephant in Mars or wherever, it seems like that's still almost like a form of imprisonment if your isbiness is incarnated in the biological meat suits, instead of like the she said there was a hierarchy of isbis, like a class system for them, and that the highest class was a free isbi, and that they can go in and out of bodies at will, provided that they don't destroy or interfere with social, economical, or political structure.
Yes.
So that, and then other ones would be like ones like us who are stuck.
We were on the lowest form.
Yeah.
The class system. And plus, if we're imprisoned here, then we would be considered that. I think the imprisonment really is that we're just not aware that we're isbis.
Or that our memories are erased.
That our memories are erased. So it's not that we're actually in the physical world. I don't think that's the prison. The prison is that we can't remember who we really are and get out of it at our will if we wanted to. Because like she was talking about how like isbis decided to get into the physical world because they were enjoying this whole idea of being in this physical body because of the sensations, and it was like kind of a game. But then they got stuck in the imprisonment of the body, where it was like they were only focused on the body and couldn't ever get out of the body. And so then there was that whole like imprisonment of the body point. But yeah, because it was an isbi's choice eventually. Like they were the one who was they were like playing around with it, like, oh, let's do a physical thing, and then like experience, and let's move out of probably these class systems and go try out a different one, and then got stuck in it.
And I wrote down that like it was just like some designs were sold to the highest bidders and others were custom orders, and so like basically all of nature is engineered. So like it'll be like the ecosystems of they would be like, oh well, this plant needs to be pollinated, so we have to create a bug that can pollinate it, and like the symbiosis like like seemed to work together. But then that made me kind of go like, but then if isn't everyone made, and why would something like why okay I don't know, I just think it's like, why if I was this animated life form that was created, like why do I want to make other, like why do I want something else to be made? I don't know, understand like what my motivation would be for having a bunch of animals. That seems like one person's dream. Like that doesn't seem like that would be.
Well, I see what you're saying, but I think maybe she did say that isbis like had two things in common. There was like a common denominator.
Yeah, I remember that. I did write that down.
Okay.
Every isbi is basically good, following, and they usually follow the golden rule, like they don't want done to others what's not done to them, and that they pretend not. Oh, no, that's a different part.
Yeah, that's something different. But she says like there are two things, and like isbis basically like when the second thing was that isbis
they like to be admired,
things, and they like to be admired. There's their creations to be admired. And like, I was like, wow. So that's where I felt like that's where the ego came in a sense, because it's like, I don't know. But the first one was, what was the first part? There were two parts to that, like the isbis, that we all like these things. 1, 2. I don't know. And then it talks about how isbis diminished our own power in order not to injure other isbis. And this was like a trickery. Because it was trapping isbis inside of our own bodies, because like if we were powerful and then wound up hurting somebody, we didn't want to hurt them, because isbis generally are good and really don't want to hurt anybody. And then we had like this feeling of remorse, and then we would lower our own abilities in order not to hurt them. And that's I feel like where we're kind of stuck in now.
Yeah, my notes do say isbis desire admiration, and the entire universe is made of unadmired illusions, basically. And that some universes are co-created illusions, and that they play God, and that pretend that they don't know all, and they solve problems, and this solves a problem of boredom. Oh yeah, that's the other thing.
Oh, the boredom.
Don't like
that was number one, right?
Yeah,
those were the two things that isbis have in common.
And then and one of the rules in this universe is that energy can be created but not destroyed.
Right, exactly. So if it's constantly recreating in the physical universe, then that would kind of make sense as to why something else gets created.
And then she did say, okay, so we pretend not to know and we forget that we are pretending. So on Earth, the propaganda is taught and agreed upon is that the gods are responsible and that the human beings are not responsible. You are taught
Mhm.
that only a god can create universes. So the responsibility for every action is assigned to another Isby or another god and never oneself. So like that's part of the game. But then that kind of goes into like that's a conceptual idea of imprisonment rather than a physicality imprisonment. But she also does seem to allude to that there is some sort of structures that have some hypnosis on our planet that if those were broken, it would help us get out of that.
Yes, yeah, I thought the same thing. I was like, so because again, I mentioned this in one of the other videos that the old domain, I'm sorry, the old empire is put into quotations. The domain is not put into quotations, but every time that the old empire is mentioned, it's in quotes. So why is that? And then to me, that was like a metaphor for our like perception of imprisonment rather than the actual physical imprisonment.
Okay,
Because if
yeah.
it was, yeah, because then otherwise she talks about the domain and that's not in quotations.
Or maybe it could just be like that it once was and is no more. So it's the old.
Oh,
I mean,
uh-huh.
maybe I don't know, but
Right. That's true because if they now took it over, if the domain now exists,
and then
occupies this
yeah.
area, then there's only remnants of it. And I think that the two are linked anyway, like the physical imprisonment and the conceptual imprisonment. Once we realize that these are all illusions and we're creating all this and we're all immortal beings and we're all powerful and all knowing and all that. And once we all kind of get onto the same page with that, then the physical imprisonment will just kind of disappear anyway. It doesn't, it's like
Well,
they're connected.
and then right before, like, so Errol gave Matilda like a 24-hour notice saying that she's going to be leaving her body.
Right.
And she, like she said, like even with their spacecraft, she's like, examine away, see what you can reverse engineer. Some
Yes.
of the metals and stuff
From
aren't going to be
here.
found here, which I know like a lot of like stuff like Linda Moulton Howe and stuff talks about is like there's this bismuth magnesium alloy thing that they've found on these things when it almost looks like it's 3D printed layers of metal. Like it's like something that we couldn't do right now because like our metalology is all about like melting and fusing like everything together, and this is almost like it's like finely thin different layers of metals that we don't and we
Oh,
don't know how they fuse like
almost
the
like a
example piece that
crystallized.
they have. Yeah, yeah,
Huh.
like there's some kind of structure to it. Anyway, so she's like, and then like when I leave this body in like 24 hours, she's like, you can do, I don't have any attachment to it. I can get another doll anytime. But like you won't be able to recreate anything from it because your technology is so far removed from where we are with that. But so whatever, go ahead and do what you will with it, but it's not going to really serve you well because it's not biological
Or mechanical.
or mechanical. Yeah. So that was kind of interesting. But then she did say right before she left her that she's like, so she basically said that you would have to destroy these devices in order to regain your memory. But like she doesn't
But
say
that
what
wasn't the only way. That wasn't the only way. That was only one way that the
that was one
domain
way.
was looking at. That's yeah, because for me, again, the takeaway was once we remember or choose that we want to remember, then that's when we're going to be able to like get rid of these like over time, get rid of the like forgetfulness. Because Matilda brought back some of her memory. So said by the end of the book, when I leave my body, I'll have forgotten and kind of gotten into it, started from a baby again and going through this whole process again, having not remembered. But at the same time, she'll probably remember more quickly.
Well, because so
Yeah,
Matilda is part of this is where it's
right.
revealed that
Yes.
Matilda is part of the 3,000 domain members that like 8,000 years ago and the like Pakistan or whatever were down in some expedition and caught. So she's identified as one of those. And then so she says that, yeah, she still is going to have to go through the karmic cycle until the domain can figure out the amnesia trick. But for now, it has to be an inside job. So it has to be something where they figure out, and apparently they've identified all the 3,000.
Yes.
But they still can't get them out.
Yeah, but again, this was in 1947, and I feel like so much has happened since that time.
Yeah.
And it says, and if humanity is to survive, although I guess this is more like humanity. I don't know if it's like the breaking away from the imprisonment system, because the other thing is basically she's like, human race will continue to shadow box the domain forces. I put in bracket, like in parentheses, as long as it's the human race. Meaning, my thought about that was like that we have to evolve in a different species that's not human. That's like different than human, because within these human prototypes, we can't really get to this
so you
other
think
level.
maybe it's like that's what this hybrid programming stuff is about?
I think so, because she already says there's no way a physical body can go into
Right,
space,
even outer
right?
space, it's not ideal for that. Yeah, I remember her talking about
right.
that.
So yeah, at this level of being like on the whole caste system, like we couldn't even get. So we have to evolve past that in order to actually, or to leave our bodies, like to get new bodies, basically, in order to at least get to the next level.
Yeah, well, she says the controlling baboons or the prison guards keep us divided, but then she also says the biggest weapon of the old empire is our ignorance of what they did.
Right.
So
that's huge.
Yeah, and then she talks about how you had mentioned this last time, but like how an ISB can inhabit more than one body at a time, and then part-time while asleep did like and some people that she talked about too. Matilda said after Errol left, which we'll talk about that in a second, Matilda kept having telepathic communications with her for the rest of her life. And she said that like she was able to resume some of her duties with the domain part-time, like as well as other people who were doing that too.
In the dream state.
In dreaming, like part-time while sleeping. And it's interesting because I'm not saying I'm one of the 3,000 or whatever, but I do think I go to work when I sleep.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Like there's a lot that happens, or you feel like energetically different while you're sleeping.
And I feel like there's like a whole other world that happens when I'm sleeping that
Right.
And I don't know, like sometimes I remember it, sometimes I don't, but I always know it's there. And like sometimes I wake up exhausted because I'm like, dang, that was an intense like dream
right.
session.
I worked a lot. Right.
Yeah. Okay, so then like let's talk a little bit about
Wait. I wanted to talk, I just found it. Chapter 13. The eventual destructions of these devices may make it possible for your memory to be restored simply by virtue of not having it erased after each lifetime. Fortunately, the memory of an ISB cannot be permanently erased. And then if humanity is to survive, it must cooperate to find effective solutions to difficult conditions of your existence on Earth. Human must arrive above its human form and discover where they are, and that they are ISBs and who they really are as ISBs, in order to transcend the notion that they are merely biological bodies. Once these realizations have been made, it may be possible to escape your current imprisonment. So I think the consciousness, that's what the whole mass consciousness is about, because like if we get to that certain point, then the imprisonment will, like, that's the inside job. We'll have broken through our own imprisonment of this, that we're not gods.
Yeah, which is interesting because like I can conceptually get behind all this, but
yeah, exactly.
Like okay,
like to do it.
Like yeah, okay, I'm a god, I'm creating all this. It's funny too because like I remember saying when I've always had this thought, but I'm kind of like, this literally could all be, everything that you experience is you in your head. It's like this could all be this is all from my perspective, which from my perspective it is all from my perspective. And like I was like, I could literally be the only one alive and just dreaming this. And my mom, I remember telling my mom that when I was little, and she's like, there's some sort of psychological word for that, I don't know, but it's something that only children have, and it's like an ego thing, and everybody, you're not the only one alive, Nikki. I mean, like, I'm not saying I'm the only one alive. I'm just saying, like, I think this could all be in my
In my
head.
head. Yeah.
um,
No, you're totally right. That's
but I
great.
guess it could be in a way.
Yeah. Well, it always, I think it is. It's like, the old adage of like, did you dream that you were awake or were you awake and you were dreaming type of thing? You know what I mean? Like, did
Right.
you wake up from your dream or did you go into the dream world when you were awake? Like, you don't really know. It's a whole mind game. You can go crazy thinking about
You really can. But even it just bought like this whole hierarchy bothers me. Hierarchy is not
it. I hear
something
you. I'm an
like
egalitarian person.
I really have an issue with hierarchy. Like even her saying that like, oh well, we're the highest the hierarchy of the class system of the Isbys throughout the old empire and the domain,
Uh-huh.
which is she's a free in quotation marks Isby, and they can come and go in the bodies provided that they don't mess with the mess or destroy it. But I'm like, who is your police of this? Like, who is like
Oh, right.
um
Well, maybe it's the collective forces of ISBE that decide that.
that doesn't seem so free to me. I don't know. I like, and
Right,
maybe
that's a good point. Is assuming, well, okay,
and
then there's no interference, but assuming that you break that in, or you interfere, then you would probably be pushed automatically, karmically pushed to another class, like through your own kind of auto regulation that you've kind of like, you know, misused your your freedom.
right.
Maybe I don't know.
This is why I think I'm in prison because it says that even though we are still here, we're like we are the essence of you're the essence of you. So even though you're reincarnated a million times, like you still have there's still like elements that are still you. And I'm just like no. Like I've always had authority issues my whole life. I just don't know. I just think it's one of those things where if I'm here in prison, if this is a prison, I think it's probably because I'm definitely one of those nonconformist.
The reason why you were put here in the first place.
Yeah,
You're like, I don't buy that.
I'm
And they're
like,
like,
wait,
get
what is
out.
this hierarchy? No. And you're
No.
like, all right, you know what? There's this place called Earth. It's gonna be good.
You're headed there right now. You're going to be attracted by those beautiful
But
bodies.
then again, it does go back
And
to the
food.
whole it does go back to the whole like Peter Pan thing where I'm like we're just we capture you and then you release us and then we capture you and like
Yeah.
it does feel like this is a giant game.
Right. And the way I thought of it too is that we're actually a part of ourselves, yeah, a part of ourself is at each level of the class system, if that's the way you want to call it. I feel like it was lack of words, lack of good vocabulary. I didn't like the word class system either because it
Yeah.
was or caste system. Sorry, maybe it was a caste system or no, I think it was class.
Yeah, I
But
guess
anyway,
you
yeah.
you could look at that with the what is it? What people always talk about, oh my higher self.
Right, that's what I was thinking. As our higher selves are on different levels. So we have already had, or we want, or we will have the experience of being the highest class. Will be the soldier class. Because like for me, I feel like naturally, like I'm like, wow, even the soldier classes that seemed to me weird too because they were using weapons or they were remotely controlled. So then I thought, well, if they're being remotely controlled, then how are they even conscious? And
Yeah,
that's actually
to
a class.
be their own ego. Yeah.
So that was confusing to me. But then I thought that's something that I would just have an aversion for. I wouldn't want to be a soldier because it would probably entail like, I don't know, authority again, or like possibly hurting others. And like that just made me not want to do it. But then I thought, well, at some level I have and I will, and I am experiencing all these things anyway. So what's the difference? Like, I'm not going to, like, you can't deny that you're at every level. An essence of yourself is at every level.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's true or has been.
Yes. In the eternal now. So what was the point that I cut you off when you wanted to go to?
I don't remember.
Maybe it was the last chapter. I'm not sure. Um, yes.
I mean, this
Oh, the prison. Sorry, go ahead.
okay, go. No, go ahead. That's fine.
The prison says that it's the prevention of looking at your own soul. So your own soul. So the paradigm of science is that science is the creation of all, and that the creator is nothing. And religion says that the creator is all, and that the creation is nothing. And the extremes are the bars of the prison cell. And the prison is actually the prevention of looking at your own soul in all of its forms and all of its wholeness. Yesterday, I heard something like, if you were to deny your soul, like your shadow parts, and just want to look at like your bright side and your positive self, then you're really not being complete about who you are. Like, you're not looking at your whole soul, because your whole soul has experienced it all.
Hmm. But sometimes I also don't understand what that means by looking at your shadow self in terms of like, is that does that mean just like looking at it without judgment, or looking at it without like shaming yourself over it, or like what, like um like sometimes I need like applicable ways in which like it would be nice, the thought form of thinking about like what that really means to examine your shadow self.
Well, that's a good question. Probably those points too, but for me, it was more like just acknowledging the fact. Like, we all want to put on, we put on our mask and present to the world who we
Our
would like
social
to
media
be.
faces, right?
Our social media faces, exactly, when really we could be having, other thoughts or other actions or words in, and those are our dark selves. And you could look at even the worst, if you were to look at like the worst thing you could possibly think of that's happening on earth, in this prison, and you can imagine a lot of horrible things, and you think that you're not that, then you really have to examine your soul again, because you are. I mean, we all are. If you look at like, I mean, it's horrible to think about, but if you think about like
Human
child
trafficking, or
pornography,
yeah,
human trafficking,
yeah.
like the bottom of the bottom, and you think like, well, that's not me. Yes, of course that's not you. Like, you wouldn't engage in that, but you have to really look at it to say there's some part of you that actually is that. And it's like, we are everything. If we're all connected, then there's nothing that we're not. And so like, to me, that's the shadow self. Like, I can't fully deny that that's not who I am, because maybe I have lived that in another life. Maybe I was a perpetrator. Maybe I
Well,
was a victim, maybe whatever.
and I did hear an analogy recently that's like we're all like raindrops in this ocean, right? And one of these raindrops is you, but one of these raindrops could have been Hitler, but it doesn't matter because you're all in the same body of water.
That's right. Right. And at what point can you separate one drop from another? Like, how do you, like a molecule of a drop, at
Hmm.
what point is it actually solid? Water is not solid. So how do you separate drops? Yeah. But I like your point about also looking at yourself without judgment, because then if you say, well, if I could be that person that I so despise, why do I despise a person or a person's actions so much? There must be something that I don't like. So I have that thing inside of me too. Let's look at it. And I feel like that's really the way to like break free of that, to not just deny it. It's like suppressing it, but suppressing it doesn't really help.
Hmm. Well, and I also feel like for me, just in the last couple of years, I've gotten better at that whole, I no longer, um, I no longer care whether or not I change someone's mind or influence anybody to think like I think, or care about the things I care about, or anything like that, because like there's value and really desirability in us all being like different political beliefs, different spectrums of everything, because like I said, like if we are all like this same source energy or whatever, like who doesn't like boredom, like let's just say that, then we aren't here to be like identical to each other.
Right.
You know, like it is cool that you have people that can be completely polarized on two different subjects, and
Yeah. Like,
it,
that's our asset. That's our greatness, not
not
like,
our weakness and our thing that
not
we
our
can
weak.
be annoyed at them about. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that's one of those things where like now I'm kind of going like, okay, like for instance, like I'm not a sports person, and for a lot of times it would be like people would be like, hey, they'll say something dumb like, hey, you want to come to my Super Bowl game and watch the blah blah, and I would just be like, ugh, like annoyed. And now I'm just like, I don't know, I don't get annoyed by that kind of stuff anymore. I'm just like, all right, well, yeah, it's like that's their thing, that's cool, and I'm glad that they like that, and then glad that I don't like that.
Right. Exactly. That's just like another facet of the diamond. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's pretty cool. I mean, it's so much. You could look at this and read
but
it
that
again and
that also
again.
makes it weird though when it says you can inhabit more than one body.
Right. But that makes sense to me because again, if a part of ourselves is at different levels or different places, and the whole is beyond time and space, which was another point, then you can inhabit bodies, which kind of is a little bit freaky because then I'm like, how conscious of am I in that body? I don't know.
Right.
But I guess if you think about it as like, we like to think of past lives, right? So you inhabited another body during that past life, but at the same time, maybe that was a different timeline, but there's no past, present, or future. So why can't you just inhabit another body like at the same time? I don't know.
Yeah, I think okay, I had a thought the other day that was kind of what it's not that I don't think that it's not true or not, but what kind of doesn't I don't like is I don't like that we forget this experience, this consciousness, and like if we do, because it almost seems all for naught, you know. So I'm kind of just
Right,
like,
totally.
ooh, like how do I get on top, or how do I get okay with not that this experience doesn't matter, like this time that I'm Nikki doesn't matter, but how do I get okay with the non-permanence of it? Like that's and for me it's kind of like I know the essence of me might exist still and go on or whatever and be in another incarnation, but I just like some part of me is kind of going like I just want some memory of this in order for it all to be for naught.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, I hear you. I know. I feel like that's part of the trick.
And so if my essence was essentially divided, would it die in half lives? I don't know. Or not, yeah, would it dilute? Would it be too diluted if it, yeah, that's sort of like what I'm kind of feeling.
Oh, I see. Yeah. I don't know because the other thing is like Errol, if Errol existed for all these millions and
Trillions of years, yeah.
trillions of years, right, and remembers all of her lives and experiences, like does that mean that she remembers like all of the details of all of the lives, or she remembers the essence? Like she remembered working for this company,
Well, it
right?
almost feels like she was continuous though. It's not even
Right.
like she had
She
to
had
remember
separate
lives.
lives.
She just never has died.
Well, she realized that she never died. Like she never forgot. Like she may have
Well, I
actually
guess that's true.
incorporated, she incorporated this doll body. So at some
Right.
point she got to that rank, but then she had probably a different doll body at like some other point in her career because she was not at that rank. So she probably remembers having had this different body and never forgot. So maybe if she decided to take on some other body for X amount of time, she would have remembered that fully. Like the difference with us is that we just forget it after each lifetime because we're stuck in this like prison system type of thing. But if we were to remember, maybe our lives would be longer, or we're also in the human prototype that only lives like 60 to 150 years, so they say. So like that's the other thing. Like multiple, like you said, maybe it's getting diluted each time. I don't know.
Well, it's even like, have you ever like looked at your hand and remembered what it looked like when it was like this big, when it was like 5? Like
Yeah,
sometimes I do that. I'll be like, I'll look at myself and I'll be like, I remember my kid body too. Like
wow.
like, and like sometimes I try to consciously remember like all the ways that the cells in this hand have developed over time, because that like a
Great.
lot of times it's hard to do. It's like I don't know, like I can't tell you exactly what my hand looked like when I was 16 versus 8 versus 4
Right.
versus 37 like I am now. I can't. I mean, it's a very hard thing to do, but we were all babies.
Right. I know that is a hard thing to do. I can't remember. Like not like to that point where like
You
you're saying, where you
remember, like where you
looked at
can
your
look at
hand.
this thing and remember what it was.
Yeah, I think it's cool when people do those whole like, oh, I took a picture, and you see like the picture of the person from the beginning of their life into like age 6, and you like go through and you're like in 2 minutes, it's a picture that they
Oh,
took
right.
every day. It's like whoa, and then you can really see it. But yeah, I haven't done that where I'm like, oh, look at like my hand, looking at my hand as my baby body.
Okay, well, let's finish real quick on the what they did to Errol. Okay, so this like once she announces that she's only gonna be here 24 hours later, they then kind of the gallery or whatever takes um Matilda aside, and they like try to be like, okay, well, before, we need you to ask her some of these questions before you go. And she's like, she's not going to answer them. She doesn't answer things. She's giving you all the information that she's going to give you. And they're like, yeah, but we need you to, we still need you to have her like sign a transcript of everything that you guys have talked about. It's printed out. We need you to sign this so that, she can verify that how you translated it was correct. And okay, that is like an awesome clause for the way that this book would work, that they would even have this information, but I don't know, it seems kind of a little bit redundant, but anyway. So then they go into so she does it, so Matilda does it, they go into the room, and then they do this dumb thing where they like attack Errol, and they try to do like shock therapy. Is that how you interpreted that?
No, I don't know. I thought it was like, to me, it almost reminded me of those like defibrillators that they were trying to shock her. But I don't, yeah, I guess like what you just said. Yeah, I don't know
Yeah,
exactly
but
what they were doing.
yeah, and
Like,
their
what was
motive.
the intention of, what was the motivation? Wasn't just to make her fall, like, what would that have done?
Yeah, I don't know. That seems so dumb. It's like, okay, so, oh, hey, well, this alien from outer space who we've been talking
Can
to for
communicate
6
telepathically.
weeks in a room. We think we understand how to get it in that grid system. We're just gonna give it some electric shocks, and it won't leave. Anyway, yeah, it left, and Errol left her body like as they came in the room, and so they killed her basically.
Yeah. Well,
That's
of course,
another way
yeah.
of saying they killed her.
Right. Well, she left. She left before they killed her, is what she said.
Well, but I think she was gonna leave because they were gonna do this.
Yeah. Well, that's true. That's true. Yeah. So maybe in that sense they killed her, but she left, and there, since she's immortal, obviously she's not really. They didn't really kill her, but she left.
Right. But for in our
Perception.
perception, we took the animation out of the the body.
Yeah.
Yeah, we killed her, which was kind of dumb and pointless. And who's Dr. General Doolittle? Is he famous or something?
Well, the only Dr. Doolittle I could think of, I was trying to figure out what year it was, because I was like, wasn't Dr. Doolittle like the guy who loves animals? There's a new movie coming about him soon, Dr.
Right. I
Doolittle.
thought it was I didn't
But
know it was
I was like, I think that was the 1800s. I don't think it's the same guy. I don't
and
know.
she mentions Charles Lindbergh was in the room
Yeah.
whenever they were trying to like was it afterwards or after the body was anyway
Like right around that point.
right around that point. So that was, and I know him, he was like the
Right.
pilot guy. But okay, so then they take Matilda and they make her go through like truth serum and like lie detector tests and try to see if she was being honest about all this, and then they honorably discharge her. She was able to keep the transcript without them knowing, and she said like I can't remember how long after, but sometime like was like within a year or so afterwards, she was in her room at home, like away from military, and Errol like voice came back into her head and was like, just let you know I'm okay, it's fine, I did leave the body at that time when they came in,
Right.
and you're part of the 3000 and whatever. And then she continued to have conference with her on and off for the rest of her life apparently, and
Yes.
continue to start working back with the domain.
Right. Yeah. On the dream state. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a good ending. Good ending to the book. Yeah, I definitely had some questions. I was like, so they put her into this witness protection program. They sent her off to Montana, and then she never said anything to anybody, and hid these transcripts, and then sent them to,
This dude when she was like in her 80s.
yeah.
Yeah.
And also my impression was that she wrote those notes, that she wrote them now, right? Like, so any of the notes that weren't the transcript, that were her personal notes, were written at this point in her
Yeah,
life.
like her reflection on him.
Yes. Yeah. Um, and and I still had some questions about the way the transcripts went down, because it said like, oh, I went, and she went and said gave the transcript to the stenographer, or like, sorry, said the interview to the stenographer at some weird point. I never felt like it was clear as to how that was done.
Okay, so then let's talk about what rings true for you, what doesn't ring true for you, what's like, what about this whole entire thing is BS, and what about it is like, you're like, yeah, I can buy that, I can get behind
Oh, okay. Yeah. So where do you want to start, with beliefs or things that like we're confused about? Maybe let's just start with our beliefs,
that. Okay.
or
All
something
right.
that we think that like, yeah,
Okay,
that could,
like I yeah, like again, we've said it a million times, but the main takeaway I do feel is that like I do feel like we are immortal spiritual beings, um, or souls, and I'd like the whole like it's not like you have a soul, you are a soul.
right. Exactly.
And
That's the
that just
same thing with me.
yeah, that distinction I quite like, and I take that away from this. Which it's like I'm sure there's other ways that we could. I mean, this isn't the only time I think that kind of thing has ever been said, but
Right.
whatever. Like I like that. And then for me, uh, yeah, I also really resonated with the whole like, like this your history's like almost intentionally scrambled, so even the best sleuth, like you were saying, couldn't possibly figure the story out because it's not really designed for you to.
Yes. Right. Yeah. 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 I think that's true too. I felt like that. But then on the other hand, it was weird because she talks about the domain having like, it sounded again to like, I guess this is not the thing. Sorry, this is not the belief. These were the things I had question about. But okay, are there any other beliefs? Because that I agree with you.
Oh, yeah, because I got a lot of things that don't sit well with me. Oh, and then yeah, I guess uh I just think like um I agree with or resonate with the fact that I feel like my memory has been taken from me in a lot of
Yeah.
ways.
Or
Whether
like
by choice or
reprogram.
not, I don't know.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, yeah, I feel that way too. I feel like we don't know a lot of what's happened. We're really cloudy about the history of our soul, and it's hard to know really what's true information or what's not, because there's so much programming that's happened throughout the ages, even in our recent history, that we can easily identify that it's and name it. Like even in our own current life, we can see these types of programming happening, from
Yeah.
cultural experiences to family to schools to society. So like that kind of programming happens in one life, so you can imagine that those happened like over
Throughout
long.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, so how do you know what's really real? It's hard to tell. Yeah. I would agree with you, all those things.
Yeah, those are the main things that stick out for me. And then the things that okay, so anything else that stuck out for you, like in terms of
I don't think so. Yeah, I think that's it. There were definitely a lot of skepticism, but I liked the whole, the Isby thing, like us being the eternal beings and immortal beings and all that. And I know we may have heard it in different places, but I liked the idea that evolution is flawed. Not that I completely disagree with evolution, but I like, once I started reading it, I'm like, oh yeah. I
it
mean,
doesn't
come
make
on.
100%
It
sense
doesn't,
either
no,
though.
it doesn't at all. And the creationism, like I haven't really read creationism, but I can imagine like that doesn't make sense to me
Well,
either.
yeah, that's also just like that's as much but they're both mumbo jumboed. They're both
Yeah.
like meh, 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 meh.
Right. They're just, yeah, they're like dogmatic, or they leave room for a lot of
I
questions.
mean, for me, like the religious dogma stuff is just like how
Yeah.
much you gonna trust these like scrolls from 2,000 years ago that are like interpreted a million different times by a million different people and
And information's left out
yeah,
anyway.
yeah, and then they intentionally leave things out and don't leave I like that
Right.
information doesn't do anything for me. Sorry, that's
Right.
like not my pinnacle of what I'm going to consider truth. But
Yes.
at the same time, I'm also like, you don't have a missing link in how we got from an ape to a human, and I've never seen. We don't have any examples of actual new species being born of one species.
Right. Right.
You
Right.
know, like
Yeah.
you can see fruit flies and stuff that will get I believe in adaptation to
Yes.
environments,
Yes,
absolutely.
exactly.
But like, so it's almost like I agree and believe in, and I always have believed in, like microevolution but not macro evolution. It
Yes,
just
I
doesn't
agree.
seem to make 100% sense yet.
No.
And then, also I get really, it is okay when people get super like, okay, I have this one friend who will use like super colorful language about how stupid I am if that I don't 100% buy into current science's notion of evolution, and he'll just use every insult in the book. You just get super violently mad about it. And he like gave me this book about the pink flamingo by Richard Dawkins or whatever, and I read it, and it has some good points about like, like, okay, there's some weird thing in a giraffe's throat that has to go all the way down its neck and back up. It's just some evolutionary flaw or something, maybe, whatever. It's just really minutely examining little flaws in biological organisms. See that stupid dinging noise? I can't turn it on. And I'm like, ugh. Even if I turned my phone off, it would still come through this thing.
Oh, yes. I hate that when it's connected. Everything syncs.
Because I was on my roll and I lost my roll. Anyway, but the thing is that it's some dumb group text that doesn't make any sense anyway. It'll be like, ha ha. So back to my rant though, is that when people have like these violent, or not even violent, but like they're just so steadfast in like these things, that's when you have to look at something. You'll be like, oh, okay. Like when people are super passionate about vaccines, or they're super passionate about like uh being in a relationship versus not being related, whatever it is, they always do these things. You kind of have to like go back and examine it and go like, okay, wait, why are you so like, is your identity's associated with this idea?
Uh-huh.
That's what I'm always like.
Or why can't you question it and look at it like, and do
Some research
critical,
on it or
or
something.
critical, no, or critical thinking, critical questioning about it, or investigate the questions that people have, that genuinely people have about it, then and to look more into it, like you said, research it. Yeah, I don't know, people get,
Because
yeah.
there literally should be nothing off limits that we should question.
Right.
Like nothing.
No, yeah, exactly. I think so. I think that's one of the nice things about this reading and book. It's like, yeah, okay, good. Let's start talking about it. And in fact, that was one of the last things Errol mentions, is that communication is the key. Or actually it wasn't, it was Matilda's personal notes, but communication is key. Let's just keep talking about this type of thing so we don't forget it, or so that we remember, or so that we make up a different idea without somebody just telling us what it is. Like we use our own mind about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, so
All right,
what
so things
didn't
that we
sit
weren't sure
well
about.
with me was, do you want to go first on this one?
No, go ahead.
Okay, what didn't sit well with me was that like you're these trillion-year-old entities and you're still having like Star Wars wars with each other. You know, and like I said, like the hierarchy and the controlling of things.
Yeah.
Just I mean, that just seems so like unevolved.
Yes. Yeah. Archaic.
un,
Like.
un
Yeah.
unprogressive.
Right. Well, I think, yeah, I could see what you're saying, and I feel that way too. Like I just naturally feel like, come on, really, is that what we're doing out in space? We're just like we're just looking for areas to dominate and to like move forward with our kingdom type of thing.
Right. And
But
death and taxes, like, oh, well, the
there's
companies built all this and there was taxes and then they ran for, I mean,
right,
some of these concepts seem very modern day human too. They're not
yes,
even like, yeah, I don't think that's a fundamental aspect of life, especially in the higher, like, non-physicality realms. I wouldn't think.
yeah, that's true. But on the other hand, we have infinity amounts of universes.
Mhm.
So this universe is like that. Sorry, but maybe those intergalactic wars don't happen in other universes.
Well, sign me up for one of those then.
Well, maybe you have an aversion to it because that's where you're originally from, a place that's not so violent, and you were deemed to be here and kind of got stuck in this role play. Because, yeah, again, if we look at, I don't know, it's hard to tell because we don't remember. Damn it. We don't remember. We can't even refer to history because it might
You're
not
like,
be right.
I don't remember. I don't
I can't remember. Oh no, don't remember. Yeah, one of the things that didn't sit well with me was just like some of the questions about the domain, because I felt like she was like, again, a big supporter of the domain because that's where she was from. But I felt like at some level the old empire, like some of the people who were outcasted to here were from the old empire, and they were like renegades, or they were people who,
artist.
yeah, but and they were rebelling against the old empire, and so they were kicked out because they didn't. Maybe they were trying to free people from these machines. So they
Mm.
were actually kicked out into Earth, and so they were originally from the old empire. So my thought was that the old empire maybe is just, again, this idea that is evolving, because if we look at the old empire, or even the domain, as like stagnant things that don't evolve or don't change, then we're not really doing them justice either. We're saying like the old domain is like this, and they wanted the people, like the barbarians who like weren't smart and like wanted to rule over other people, and maybe there were some isbies like that, but that doesn't mean that all of the domain is like that. Like eventually they would evolve, or in their own thinking or being as well. So I don't know. So I felt like on the one
Right.
hand, it made it sound like the old domain was so bad, but then I was thinking, well, maybe that part of it or that aspect of it. And then it was hard for me to distinguish what like the old empire, and why the domain was so like,
Adamant about enforcing that they were bad.
yeah, or that the domain was good, that they weren't that they are going to now, they occupy this area of the galaxy, they took it over, and that they're not really enforcing anything, and they're letting people have their free will type of thing. That was
Right.
my takeaway. Again, that was my interpretation of what that was. Like, we're allowed to do whatever, they don't want to get involved too much, they're just looking for their 3,000 people that is these that came here. And then what? I'm like, so like, does that make you that much better? Like, I don't know, I guess that's our
Well,
human
and it
perspective
was really
to interpret it.
inconsistent about how much they care or don't care about Earth. It's like they do some reconnaissance because they maybe don't want the bugs and all the or not the bug. They don't want us to destroy a lot of stuff because it's hard to get back.
Right,
So they have some invested interest in
like
maybe keeping
species, or
some resources like untarnished on here. But
right,
then
right.
and at this and they also have some people here, but at the same time it's like we care, don't care, don't care about you. I got a lot of flip-flopping of that I was like,
Yes, and here's some information for you to figure out, which I appreciate, because it was like they weren't, Errol wasn't telling us what to think. It was just like, oh, I've been given this information that I'm now allowed to share with you, but I can't share any additional information. Like, this is what I can give you, and here it is.
hmm,
And you do whatever you want with it, which is fine. It was just something that I was kind of confused about. Oh, and let's go back to the Vedic hymns. She
oh
speaks
yeah,
about the Vedic hymns here, and she said the Vedic hymns contain information about evolution. However, Vedic hymns are verses that contain half-truths, reversals of truths, or fanciful meanings. And then she goes on to say that when there was the reconnaissance mission and they, for original 900, 3,000 ISBs were stationed there, they were giving the Vedic hymns to the local people. And then the people memorized them over and
Yeah, but
did
she said
oral
that
tradition.
the Vedic hymns are like the Grimm's tells. They're not dogmatic facts.
Right, exactly. But then on the other
been
hand,
abused and misused, but that's all you got here.
no, but then it says later on, the Vedic hymns were brought by the Domain Expeditionary Force 8,200 years ago. And this is, so my thought was, if this is true, if she said earlier that the Vedic hymns were half-truths and fanciful meanings, why did the Domain Force bring them forth in this manner? And then apparently the verses were taught to some local humans who memorized them, and it wasn't an authorized activity by the Domain. So no one in the Domain credits the Vedic hymns for factual material. And they said that and then the humans said that the Vedic hymns came from the gods and were practiced as dogmatic fact, and the philosophy was ignored. So these ISBs who brought the Vedic hymns, like, weren't authorized to give the Vedic hymns from the Domain, and with that confused the people about the meaning of the Vedic hymns and who they came from. So it was like all skewed. So I was like, so the Domain, while they're saying like the Domain always speaks the truth, like the truth in an earlier
but the whole religious stuff really did confuse me, because they also went into even previous chapters. Remember, it talked about how what is that one, Zodiac, like that Zoroastrianism or something, about how like it always talked about how,
yeah,
I think it was Zoroastrianism, like the first monotheistic religion or something, where it kind of would go back and forth about how like they did some religious warfaring with the old empire within us to like they wanted to show us that we were all ISBs, but then at the same time it would get misconstrued and there would only be one ISB that we all had to follow, and this and that. And so you were kind of like going back of like it almost in the whole entire book went back and forth whether or not it liked monotheism, or because it did kind of say that it put Zoroastrianism, which was the first monotheistic religion, it kind of alluded that the Domain influenced that. Yeah. But then it also kind of, if it influenced the Vedic hymns, that's polytheism. So like what are you doing here? Like what's your thing? It feels like they've jumbled up the religion more than helped it.
Well, I guess to an extent, but it was all our interpretation on it. And also, right? So we interpreted it like humans, and plus they like it is pointed out that we because we keep forgetting, and because we keep getting like these what are they called, like trances or whatever, like brainwashing things over and over, hypnotic trances, then we have forgotten, or we just are kind of given this information now, and it's kind of like repeating all these patterns. But originally we could have gotten some information and looked at it and kind of been like thoughtfully, I don't know, interpreting it, but then like because we died and have a new life, we forgot it all and have to start over again.
Right. Well,
and also I think with the whole monotheism or polytheism, okay, so I think it goes into the whole mystery of that we're all one and that we're all individual souls. So it's, yeah, so if we're all gods, then there's polytheism because we're each and every ISB is a god, but then we're all one part of this whole experience, and we can't really be separated. So there's monotheism. So it's always the whole, I don't know, polarity of it.
Well, and it's like there's half truths and everything.
That's true. Half truths.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, y'all. So that was the alien interview, man. And it was I mean, take it for what you like of it or not, but it's look how much food for thought it gave us for like 4 episodes, man. That was fun.
Yeah. And really you could break it down like thought by thought, like page by page or chapter by chapter. There's so much to it. Like you could just get into it even more. And the narrator of it, that was my other thought. I noticed it in the last episode, in the last hour.
Yeah, the emphasis that he puts on things.
Well, not just that, but I actually noticed that stopped it, and then I heard him make a comment about, I heard him say 1947.
Oh, right.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
and so, but that wasn't written there. So my thought was like he had stopped that and was like, you know, also discussing the information maybe, or going.
Well, and I also found it interesting that it's like skipped chapter 12. Very
Oh,
short.
yes.
I was like, okay.
What? Yeah.
Maybe you actually read the transcript there. Like, yeah. So,
Right.
okay, there was a whole chapter that I was like, this is very short. Let's just skip
Yes.
it.
Yeah. And the footnotes, it would be nice to actually read the book yourself and the footnotes. And plus he inserted his own pictures, which may have not been related. In fact, he put in a picture of supposedly Matilda with the person who was doing the lie detector test,
Mhm.
Dr. somebody, Weil, I don't remember. But
Right.
was that really her? Like, that was another question I had. Did she include that picture? I wish she had said, by the way, this is actually Matilda.
It doesn't look like it because the
She
one
would
on the
look
cover
like
of the book
older.
looks, she's a 23-year-old at
Right.
the end. She, like, when she's doing the lie detector test, she says she's 23, and that looked like a woman who was in her 40s
Like
or 50s.
40s or something. That's what I
Yeah.
thought too. I was like, this doesn't seem right. That was another thing that was like confusing.
But that was almost like the person who edited the video.
No, it was.
Yeah.
That's my point. Is like, it would be better to read the book yourself without having these inserts of pictures that weren't really necessarily related.
True.
Yeah.
Very true.
But plenty of stuff to go on. Please leave your comments. Let
Yeah,
us know what
and
you
geek
think.
out with us about it if you want, because hey, you know, like
Right.
we spent some
Yeah.
time on this, so yeah.
Hope you do too. All right. Well,
All right.
stay tuned for our next episodes. We got some good things coming up. More books.
Woohoo! All right, later.
Bye.
Bye.